The morning sun peeked through the tall windows of Westfield Academy as Dr. Maya Johnson arranged the chemistry handouts on each desk. The classroom smelled of polished wood and expensive air fresheners, little reminders that this wasn't just any school. This was where America's elites sent their children. For 15 years, Dr. Johnson had walked these hallways, her heels clicking against marble floors that had seen generations of future politicians, CEOs, and celebrities learn their first equations. At 42, her dark hair now showed touches of gray at the temples, earned from years of dedication to students who often viewed education as something they were entitled to rather than a privilege to be treasured. Another day, she whispered to herself, straightening her navy blazer and adjusting the small microscope pin on her lapel, a gift from a rare student who had actually thanked her for pushing them to excel. The bell rang, and within moments, teenagers in crisp uniforms began filing in. Most barely acknowledged her presence. A few nodded politely. Dr. Johnson had grown used to this invisible feeling, being seen without being truly seen. As one of only 3 black teachers in the entire faculty of 57, she had mastered the art of professional warmth while maintaining emotional distance. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her voice carrying the slight hint of her Louisiana upbringing. "Please open your textbooks to page 214. We're continuing our discussion on organic compounds." From the back row came the usual whispers and smirks from a group of senior boys, led by a tall student whose father's name appeared regularly on news channels. The boy, Thomas, locked eyes with Dr. Johnson for a brief moment before turning to share some private joke with his friends. Their laughter, though quiet, felt loud in its intention. Dr. Johnson continued her lesson, chalking complex formulas on the board with practiced ease. After completing her doctorate at Yale, she could have worked anywhere, prestigious research labs, pharmaceutical companies that would have doubled her salary. But teaching had called to her. Even here, where some days felt like swimming against a powerful current. During a lab demonstration, she noticed 2 girls from the front row exchange looks when she explained a concept. One mouthed something that made the other cover her mouth to hide a smile. Dr. Johnson pretended not to notice, but her stomach tightened with a familiar knot. When class ended, Assistant Principal Rivera stopped by her doorway. "Maya, how's it going with the honors chemistry class?" His smile seemed genuine, though they both knew what he was really asking. Any problems with the rich kids? "We're making progress," she answered carefully, gathering her papers. "Though I'm concerned about some students not taking the material seriously with finals approaching." Rivera's smile dimmed slightly. "Well, you know how it is. Senioritis hits them all. Just try to keep things smooth until graduation. The Williams family donated the new library wing, and the Rosenbergs are considering funding our STEM initiative." She nodded, understanding what remained unsaid. "Don't rock the boat. Don't push too hard. Remember who really runs things here." After he left, Dr. Johnson sat at her desk, opening her planner to review tomorrow's lesson. A note fell out. A handwritten comment on school letterhead. Perhaps advanced chemistry would benefit from more accessible instruction methods. It wasn't signed, but she recognized the handwriting of Board Chairman Phillips, whose grandson sat in her 3rd period class. Dr. Johnson took a deep breath and placed the note carefully in her desk drawer, where she kept all such suggestions. 15 years of them now filled the drawer, a paper trail of quiet indignities. Through her classroom window, she could see students crossing the perfectly manicured quad, backpacks slung casually over designer uniforms. The children of privilege being groomed for power. She watched them laugh and move with the easy confidence of those who've never been told no. Yet despite everything, Dr. Johnson still believed in what she did. Every formula written, every concept explained was her small rebellion, her insistence that knowledge and excellence belonged to everyone. Tomorrow she would return, back straight, voice clear, ready to teach anyone willing to learn, regardless of whether they were willing to seek her as she truly was. Little did she know that tomorrow would bring a challenge that would test everything she stood for. Spring arrived at Westfield Academy with bursts of cherry blossoms and the heavy scent of wealth. The senior class buzzed with talk of college acceptances and summer plans on private islands. Dr. Johnson noticed a shift in her advanced chemistry class, something beyond the usual spring fever. It began with Thomas and his 4 friends arriving late, strolling in without apologies, designer backpacks swinging casually from their shoulders. When Dr. Johnson asked Thomas to explain the properties of alkali metals, he leaned back in his chair. "Sorry, Dr. J, isn't that information in the textbook? Why repeat what's already written down?" His smile never reached his eyes, and the other students shifted uncomfortably, except for his inner circle who exchanged knowing glances. After class, Dr. Johnson overheard a snippet of conversation as the group huddled near their lockers. "Just posted it. Already got 20 likes, Thomas said, showing something on his phone that made the others laugh. They fell silent when they noticed her walking past. That evening, while grading papers at home, Dr. Johnson received an email from a concerned student who wished to remain anonymous. "You should know what they're doing," it read, followed by a link. Her stomach dropped as the page loaded, a private social media group called Johnson's Jokes. The screen filled with manipulated images of her face, pasted onto bodies in ridiculous poses. Comments beneath mocked everything from her hair to her teaching style. Worst were the questions about her qualifications with thinly veiled racist undertones. "Wonder how she really got her degree," read one comment from Thomas. "Probably the same way she got hired here." Another student had replied with a winking emoji. Dr. Johnson's hands trembled as she closed her laptop. In 15 years of teaching, she'd faced prejudice in many forms, but never so organized, never so public. She poured herself a glass of water, spilling some as she tried to steady her nerves. "They're just kids," she told her empty kitchen, but the words felt hollow. These weren't just any kids. These were children raised in homes where power was currency and consequences were for other people. Thomas's father had just announced his campaign for state senate, his Smilin family plastered across billboards throughout the city. The next day, Thomas and his friends arrived with identical smirks. During the lab portion of class, they gathered at one table despite Dr. Johnson's assigned seating chart. "Please return to your assigned partners," she said, keeping her voice level. "We work better together," replied Thomas, not bothering to look up. "Isn't that what you always say, Dr. Johnson? Find what works for you." A girl named Zoe spoke up from across the room. "I think Dr. Johnson meant within the rules, not ignoring them." Her voice quavered slightly, but her eyes were steady. Thomas's friend Kevin turned toward Zoe. "Nobody asked you to think." The cruelty in his voice silenced the room. Dr. Johnson stepped between them. "That's enough. Kevin, principal's office now." She wrote a quick note explaining the situation. Kevin took the note with a smile. "My dad had lunch with Principal Harrison yesterday. They played golf together last weekend too." He said it casually, but the message was clear. That afternoon, Dr. Johnson wasn't surprised when Kevin returned to class without consequences. What did surprise her was finding her classroom door plastered with printouts from the Johnson's Jokes page. A handful of students helped her take them down before too many others saw, but whispers followed her throughout the day. During her free period, Dr. Johnson sought out Mrs. Patel, the only other teacher of color in the science department. "Document everything," Mrs. Patel advised, eyes concerned behind her glasses. "I've been here 20 years, Maya. These families, they believe rules are suggestions that apply to everyone else." "The administration should handle this," Dr. Johnson insisted. Mrs. Patel's sad smile spoke volumes. "Should and will are different things at Westfield. These aren't just rich kids, they're investments. The school sees dollar signs, not discipline problems." Later that week, while explaining molecular structures, Dr. Johnson noticed Thomas and his friends passing a phone between them, stifling laughter. When she approached, Thomas looked up innocently. "Just checking the time," he said, though the classroom wall clearly displayed a clock. That night, the Johnson's Jokes page gained 50 new members. Someone had drawn cartoon speech bubbles making her say ridiculous things during that day's lesson. The comments grew bolder, meaner. What hurt most wasn't the mockery but seeing names of students she thought respected her joining in. Power and popularity were magnets few teenagers could resist. As Dr. Johnson prepared for bed, her phone pinged with an email from the principal. "Annual science fair moved up 2 weeks. Please have your students ready to present." The science fair, Westfield's biggest event of the spring semester, attended by parents, alumni, and press. Dr. Johnson had always presented the awards. She didn't know it yet, but Thomas and his friends were already planning something special for the occasion, something that would force the entire school to choose sides. The day of the science fair arrived with perfect weather, sunshine streaming through the tall windows of Westfield Academy's grand hall. Parents in expensive suits and designer dresses mingled with potential donors, champagne glasses clinking as they admired student projects displayed on gleaming tables. Dr. Johnson adjusted her blue dress, the one she saved for special occasions, and took a deep breath. Despite everything, she felt proud of her students' work. Even Thomas and his friends had created impressive projects, their resources and private tutors ensuring polished presentations. "You look nice," said Mrs. Patel, appearing beside her with a program in hand. "Are you ready for this?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Dr. Johnson replied, scanning the crowd. She spotted Thomas's father, the Senate candidate, working the room with practiced handshakes and camera-ready smiles. His son stood nearby with his friends, all in matching blazers, looking unusually focused on the technical booth at the back of the hall. Principal Harrison approached, his bow tie slightly crooked. "Ah, Dr. Johnson, our star chemistry teacher. Several parents have mentioned how impressed they are with the projects." His words were friendly, but his eyes darted nervously around the room. "No issues with any students lately, I hope." Before she could answer, the lights dimmed. It was time for the awards presentation. Dr. Johnson walked to the podium, her note cards ready. Behind her loomed the giant projection screen used to display photos of winning projects. She tapped the microphone twice and smiled as conversations quieted. "Welcome to Westfield Academy's annual science fair. I'm Dr. Maya Johnson, head of advanced chemistry. Today we celebrate the remarkable scientific achievements of our students." As she began announcing honorable mentions, she noticed Thomas and his friends huddled near a side door, heads bent over a phone. A strange feeling crept up her spine, but she continued professionally. In third place, for innovative use of sustainable materials, the screen behind her flickered. A murmur rippled through the audience. Dr. Johnson turned slightly and caught a glimpse of the screen changing from her presentation slides to something else. Her heart skipped. Suddenly, there it was, screenshots from the Johnson's Jokes page blown up for everyone to see. Manipulated photos of her face on ridiculous bodies. Cruel comments about her teaching, her appearance, her qualifications. One particularly offensive image showed her with exaggerated features and the caption, "When you need extra help getting hired." The audience gasped. Someone dropped a glass. Dr. Johnson froze, the microphone still in her hand, as her most private humiliation played out on a 20-foot screen behind her. For 28 agonizing seconds, she would later remember counting each one. The images continued changing, each worse than the last. From the corner of her eye, she saw Thomas and his friends barely containing their laughter. Principal Harrison rushed toward the AV booth, but the tech team was already scrambling to regain control of the system. Finally, the screen went black. In the silence that followed, Dr. Johnson could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. The faces in the audience blurred, some shocked, some embarrassed, some secretly amused. Thomas's father whispered urgently to an assistant while maintaining his politician's smile. Somehow, Dr. Johnson found her voice. Technical difficulties appear to be part of today's science lesson. Her words came out steady, surprising even herself. "While our team addresses this issue, please continue enjoying the student exhibits." She stepped away from the podium, her legs wooden. Mrs. Patel appeared at her side, grasping her elbow firmly. "Head high," she whispered. "Don't give them the satisfaction." Dr. Johnson nodded, feeling oddly detached as they walked through the parting crowd. Some parents avoided eye contact. Others offered sympathetic glances. One mother actually smirked. In the hallway outside, Dr. Johnson leaned against the wall, finally letting out a shaky breath. "They planned this," she said. "The whole thing." "Of course they did," Mrs. Patel replied. "Question is, what happens now?" Principal Harrison burst through the doors, his face flushed. "Dr. Johnson, I can't express how deeply sorry. A terrible prank. We're investigating who could have." "We all know who did it," Dr. Johnson said quietly. The principal's expression shifted. Now, let's not jump to conclusions without evidence. These are serious accusations against students from very connected families. I saw Thomas and his friends controlling something on their phones right before it happened, she insisted. Phones? Teens are always on phones, Harrison said, straightening his bow tie. Listen, I think it's best if you take the rest of the day off. I'll handle the awards. We'll discuss this Monday after everyone's had time to cool down. As he returned to the hall, Mrs. Patel squeezed Dr. Johnson's hand. This isn't over. No, Dr. Johnson agreed, a new resolve hardening within her. It's just beginning. Later that evening, alone in her apartment, Dr. Johnson's phone buzzed constantly with messages from colleagues and students. Most expressed shock and sympathy. A few brave students sent screenshots of Thomas bragging in text groups about their epic prank. Dr. Johnson sat at her kitchen table, a cup of tea growing cold beside her. For 15 years, she had played by their rules, kept her head down, worked twice as hard, made herself small when necessary, all to survive in their world. She opened her laptop and began typing, documenting every incident, every name, every detail she could remember. By morning, as sunlight crept across her floor, Dr. Johnson had made a decision. She was done playing by their rules. Monday morning came too quickly. Dr. Johnson sat in Principal Harrison's office, watching him fidget with his gold pen. A gift from last year's graduating class he'd mentioned several times before. The weekend had brought no rest, only a flood of messages from concerned colleagues and a handful of brave students. And silence, deafening silence, from the administration. Maya, Principal Harrison began, using her first name despite her preference for professional titles. What happened at the science fair was unfortunate, truly unfortunate. He tapped his pen against the polished desk. However, we need to handle this with discretion. Dr. Johnson waited, her face carefully neutral though her heart pounded. The board suggests a quick resolution. Thomas and the other boys will write apology letters. We'll consider the matter closed. He slid a folder toward her. They're good kids who made a bad choice. College-bound. Futures ahead of them. Dr. Johnson opened the folder. Inside were 5 nearly identical notes, each barely 3 sentences long. Thomas's simply read, "Sorry about what happened at the science fair. It was just meant as a joke. No offense intended." No offense. Dr. Johnson repeated, her voice steady despite the anger building inside her. They'd publicly humiliated me with racist content. Harrison winced at the word racist. That's a very serious accusation, Maya. These families have been Westfield supporters for generations. Thomas's father chairs our biggest fundraising committee. The Whitley family donated our new swimming pool last year. And that makes their behavior acceptable. Of course not. Harrison sighed. But they're teenagers. The school board feels this should be a learning opportunity, not a punishment opportunity. Dr. Johnson set the folder down. What exactly will they learn if there are no consequences? They've been talked to very sternly. Harrison straightened a photo on his desk, himself with the governor at a charity event. I'm asking you to accept their apologies so we can all move forward. And if I don't? Something hardened in Harrison's expression. The board hopes you'll be reasonable. End-of-year evaluations are coming up. We need teachers who are team players. The threat hung in the air between them. Walking back to her classroom, Dr. Johnson passed Thomas and his friends lounging in the hallway. They fell silent as she approached, then burst into laughter after she passed. Her hands trembled slightly as she unlocked her door. Inside, a small surprise awaited. A potted plant sat on her desk with a card signed by several students from her freshman chemistry class. "We think you're a great teacher," it read simply. She touched one of the leaves gently, finding strength in the small gesture of support. During lunch, Dr. Johnson sat alone in the faculty lounge until Mrs. Patel joined her. So, Mrs. Patel asked quietly. "Apology letters and a warning about being a team player," Dr. Johnson replied. Mrs. Patel shook her head. Unsurprising but still disappointing. Mr. Winters from the English department stopped by their table. Heard what happened. Terrible business. He glanced around to make sure no one was listening. If you need support, Maya, I'm behind you. Though maybe keep that between us for now. He hurried away before she could respond. That pattern repeated throughout the day. Colleagues expressed private sympathy but public distance. No one wanted to risk their position by openly supporting her against the wishes of wealthy donors. After school, Dr. Johnson found an email from the Parent Association requesting she attend their next meeting to address concerns about classroom management, as if she were the problem. That evening, she called her brother, a lawyer in Chicago. "They're protecting these kids because of money," she explained, pacing her living room. "Are you surprised?" he asked. "Private schools run on donations, not justice. I've given 15 years to this place," she said. "And they've taken every minute while giving as little as possible in return," he pointed out. "You could find another teaching position, one where you're valued." Dr. Johnson paused by her window, looking out at the city lights. Running away would just reinforce what these kids already believe, that people like us can be pushed aside when inconvenient. "So what will you do?" She didn't answer immediately. On her coffee table lay a stack of college recommendation letters she'd been asked to write for Thomas and his friends, their futures partly in her hands despite everything. "I'm going to fight," she finally said. "Not just for myself, but for every teacher who comes after me. Every student who isn't protected by wealth or connections." "It won't be easy," her brother warned. "These families have resources." "So do I," Dr. Johnson replied. "They just don't know it yet." The next day, Thomas approached her desk after class, the familiar smirk on his face. "Did you get my apology letter, Dr. Johnson? My father says it's very important that we put this misunderstanding behind us." "Misunderstanding?" she repeated. "The science fair thing. Just a prank that went too far," he shrugged. "By the way, have you finished my recommendation letter for Stanford? Their admissions office called my dad yesterday to check on it." Dr. Johnson looked at him, really looked at him, seeing not just the arrogant teenager, but the entitled adult he would become if nothing changed. "I'll handle your letter with exactly the care and consideration you've shown me, Thomas," she said evenly. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. As Thomas left, Dr. Johnson opened her desk drawer and pulled out a notebook. On the first clean page, she wrote documentation, harassment, and discrimination at Westfield Academy. Under it, she began listing names, dates, and incidents. The real work was just beginning. Dr. Johnson worked late into the evening, the school hallways quiet except for the occasional squeak of the night janitor's cart. She'd started staying after hours, using the silence to gather her thoughts and her evidence. Her classroom had become a sort of headquarters for her private investigation. Night, Dr. J called Mr. Reyes the janitor as he pushed his cart past her open door. "Working late again?" "Just finishing up some things," she replied with a smile. After he moved on, she locked her door and pulled out a thick binder from her bottom drawer. Inside were printouts of every screenshot she'd collected from the Johnson's Jokes page, each one labeled with names and dates. She also had copies of emails, text messages from supportive students, and her own detailed accounts of each incident. But she needed more. The school's response had made it clear that her word alone wouldn't be enough. The next morning, Dr. Johnson arrived early and headed straight to the administrative office. Mrs. Green, the secretary who'd been at Westfield longer than anyone, was already at her desk. "Good morning, Maya. You're in bright and early." "I need to check something in the student handbook," Dr. Johnson said. "The official one filed with the accreditation board, not the summary we give to parents." Mrs. Green raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. She unlocked a cabinet and handed over a thick binder. "Take your time." Dr. Johnson flipped through the pages until she found what she was looking for. Section 12, Student Conduct and Disciplinary Procedures. Her finger traced down the page, stopping at subsection 12.4, Harassment and Discrimination. She read it twice to be sure. The policy clearly stated, any student found responsible for harassment or discrimination based on race, gender, religion, or other protected characteristics will face disciplinary action up to and including expulsion. Dr. Johnson took a photo with her phone, careful to include the school's official seal on the page header. "Find what you needed?" Mrs. Green asked as she returned the binder. "I did, thank you." Dr. Johnson hesitated, then added, "Mrs. Green, in your 30 years here, has anyone ever been expelled for harassment?" The older woman thought for a moment. 3 students, if I recall correctly, all from middle-class families on scholarship. She gave Dr. Johnson a knowing look. Never any of the board members' children, if that's what you're asking. During her morning class, Dr. Johnson noticed Zoe, the girl who had spoken up for her before, watching Thomas and his friends with obvious discomfort as they continued their subtle mockery, coughing pointedly whenever Dr. Johnson turned to write on the board. After class, she asked Zoe to stay behind. "Am I in trouble?" the girl asked nervously. "Not at all," Dr. Johnson assured her. "I just wanted to check if you're all right. I've noticed some tension." Zoe looked down at her hands. "I'm fine. Zoe, I've been teaching for 15 years. I know when a student isn't fine." The girl remained silent for so long that Dr. Johnson thought she wouldn't speak. Then suddenly, words tumbled out. "They've been doing it to other teachers too, not just you. Mr. Winters in English, Mrs. Patel in biology. Anyone who gives them less than an A or calls them out." Zoe's voice shook. "They have a whole system. They call it teacher takedown. They record classes and edit the footage to make it sound like teachers are saying inappropriate things." Dr. Johnson felt a chill. "Do you have proof of this?" Zoe hesitated, then pulled out her phone. "My friend was in their group chat before she transferred schools. She sent me screenshots because she felt guilty." She passed over her phone. "I was going to tell someone, but Thomas's dad is friends with the principal, and Kevin's mom is on the school board." Dr. Johnson scrolled through the messages, her heart sinking as she saw plans to target multiple teachers, with special attention given to the few teachers of color. "Zoe, would you be willing to go on record about this?" Fear flashed across the girl's face. "I can't. My parents sacrificed everything for me to attend Westfield. If I cause trouble—" "I understand," Dr. Johnson said gently. "But may I keep copies of these messages? I promise to protect your identity." Zoe nodded, sending the screenshots to Dr. Johnson's email before hurrying out. That afternoon, Dr. Johnson met with Mrs. Patel in the science lab storage room, one of the few places without cameras. "It's worse than we thought," Dr. Johnson explained, showing her the screenshots. "They've targeted multiple teachers." Mrs. Patel adjusted her glasses. "I suspected as much. Last semester, a manipulated recording of me supposedly making fun of students' religions circulated briefly. The administration called it a misunderstanding when I reported it." "Have you kept any evidence?" "Everything," Mrs. Patel confirmed. "I learned long ago that people like us need receipts." By Friday, Dr. Johnson had spoken discreetly with 6 other teachers, all of whom had experienced similar harassment. 5 agreed to share their documentation. Mr. Winters was the only one who backed out. "I'm sorry, Maya. 2 years to retirement. I just can't risk it," he explained, shame evident in his voice. During lunch, Dr. Johnson noticed a younger teacher, Miss Chen from the math department, being cornered by Thomas and his friends. Their voices carried across the courtyard. "Just wondering if our test grades might improve with a little reconsideration," Thomas was saying smoothly. "My father mentioned he'd love to discuss the new calculator program your department wants at the next board meeting." Miss Chen's face flushed as she clutched her folders tighter. Dr. Johnson approached them. "Everything all right here?" The boys dispersed with practiced innocence. Miss Chen shot her a grateful look. "They've been pressuring me for weeks," she admitted when the boys were gone, implying their parents could help or hurt my position here. "Would you be willing to put that in writing?" Dr. Johnson asked. That evening, as Dr. Johnson organized her growing file of evidence, a notification pinged on her computer. She'd been monitoring the Johnson's Jokes page, and there was new activity. "Watch Dr. J crash and burn at next week's board meeting," Thomas had posted. "Dad says she's filing some kind of complaint, like that's going to work." Dr. Johnson sat back, momentarily stunned. Someone on the board had leaked her confidential complaint request. The system was even more stacked against her than she realized. But as she looked at the thick folder of evidence she'd collected, documentation of not just her own harassment, but a pattern of behavior affecting multiple teachers, a sense of calm determination settled over her. They thought money and connections made them untouchable. They were about to learn otherwise. The morning of the board meeting arrived with dark clouds hanging over Westfield Academy. Dr. Johnson stood before her bathroom mirror, adjusting the collar of her most professional blazer, navy blue with supple gold buttons. Her mother had always told her to dress for the battle you intend to win. "You can do this," she whispered to her reflection. She'd barely slept, going over her presentation countless times. Everything had to be perfect. When she arrived at school, the hallways buzzed with unusual energy. Word had spread about the special board meeting. Students whispered as she passed, and teachers offered tight smiles or quick nods, silent signals of support from those too afraid to speak up publicly. Mrs. Patel intercepted her by the science wing. "They moving the meeting to the conference room in the East Building," she said quietly. "Last-minute change." Dr. Johnson frowned. The East Building was the oldest part of campus, far from the main offices. They're trying to make it difficult for anyone to attend. "Some of us will be there anyway," Mrs. Patel assured her, squeezing her arm before hurrying off to class. During her morning chemistry class, Dr. Johnson noticed Thomas was absent, though his friends watched her with smug expressions. One of them filmed her with his phone until she asked him to put it away. "Just documenting your teaching style," he said with a smirk. "For educational purposes." By lunch, her phone buzzed with a text from Principal Harrison. "Board chair requests you bring only essential materials to the 4 p.m. meeting. Brief discussion only." Dr. Johnson didn't bother responding. The 3 boxes of evidence she prepared weren't negotiable. At 3:45, she made her way to the East Building, where Mrs. Green from the administrative office waited by the entrance. "They've limited attendance," Mrs. Green whispered, looking troubled. "Teachers were told the meeting is administrative only." She pressed a key into Dr. Johnson's hand. "Back entrance. Some people are already inside." The small conference room was arranged like a courtroom. Board members sat at a long table on a slightly raised platform. Chairman Phillips, Thomas's grandfather, sat center, flanked by 6 other board members, all parents of current or former students, all major donors. To Dr. Johnson's surprise, about a dozen teachers had managed to find their way in, including Mrs. Patel, Miss Chen, and even Mr. Winters. They sat together in the back row. Principal Harrison paced near the door, looking uncomfortable as Dr. Johnson wheeled in her boxes of materials. "Dr. Johnson," Chairman Phillips began without waiting for everyone to settle, "we understand you have some concerns about student behavior. We've allocated 15 minutes for this discussion before moving to budget matters." "I'll need more than 15 minutes," Dr. Johnson replied calmly, unpacking her first binder. "I'm afraid our agenda is quite full. I'm addressing a pattern of harassment and discrimination that violates not only school policy but potentially state law," she interrupted, her voice steady. "I believe that warrants proper attention." Murmurs spread through the room. One board member leaned over to whisper to Phillips, who frowned deeply. "Very well. Please proceed, but be concise." Dr. Johnson took a deep breath and began. She started not with her own experience, but with the school's mission statement projected onto the wall behind her. "Westfield Academy prides itself on developing young leaders of character and integrity," she read. "Yet some students have been permitted to engage in behavior that contradicts every value this institution claims to uphold." She methodically presented her evidence, screenshots, testimonials, video clips, documenting not just the science fair humiliation, but dozens of other incidents targeting multiple teachers, particularly teachers of color and women. "This isn't about teenage pranks," she explained, her voice growing stronger. "This is about a culture that tells certain students they're above the rules. A culture that says money and connections matter more than character and conduct." Chairman Phillips interrupted. "These are serious allegations against our students." "Against specific students," Dr. Johnson corrected. 5 seniors who have engaged in documented harassment with no meaningful consequences." She turned to a new section in her presentation. Westfield's own disciplinary code states clearly that harassment based on race or gender is grounds for expulsion. Yet when applied to certain students, these rules are treated as mere suggestions. The room grew tense as she displayed side-by-side cases. 3 scholarship students expelled for much less serious infractions versus no action taken against wealthy students for egregious behavior. "The message we're sending is devastating," she continued. "We tell less privileged students that rules will be enforced against them harshly. We tell privileged students that rules don't apply to them at all. And worst of all, we tell them that money can erase consequences, a lesson they'll carry into adulthood. Chairman Phillips's face had reddened. Dr. Johnson, while we appreciate your concerns, these are complex matters. They're actually quite simple, she countered. Either our rules apply to everyone or they apply to no one. She turned to her final exhibit, printouts of emails between board members discussing how to handle the Johnson situation while protecting the students involved. These communications, which are received from a concerned source, show that the priority has been protecting certain families, not upholding school values. Gasps echoed through the room. One board member stood abruptly, whispering urgently to Phillips. Principal Harrison stepped forward. Perhaps we should continue this in private. No, Dr. Johnson said firmly. This happened publicly. It should be addressed publicly. She straightened her shoulders and faced the board directly. I've been patient. I've followed every proper channel. But it's clear that the usual procedures won't work when the system itself is compromised. She placed a thick folder on the table. This contains my formal complaint with all evidence ready to be submitted to the Department of Education, the school's accreditation board, and the press if necessary. It details not just harassment, but the systematic protection of certain students from consequences. The room fell silent. I don't want to take this route, she continued, her voice softer but no less determined. I love teaching. I love this school and its potential. But I cannot stand by while students learn that money buys immunity from responsibility. She looked each board member in the eye. You have a choice. Address this properly now, or explain to parents, alumni, and the community why you protected bullies at the expense of educational integrity. For several long moments, no one spoke. Then Mrs. Patel stood. I can confirm Dr. Johnson's accounts. I've experienced similar treatment. Miss Chen rose next, then another teacher and another, until nearly everyone was standing. Chairman Phillips cleared his throat. This is highly irregular. We'll need to discuss. There's nothing to discuss, said an unexpected voice from the doorway. Everyone turned to see an elegantly dressed woman enter, Mrs. Whitley, mother of one of Thomas's friends and a major donor. I came to see why my son's teacher was being questioned. Instead, I find my son is the one who should be answering questions. She approached the board table. If even half of what I just heard is true, I'm ashamed. We send our children here to become leaders, not bullies protected by their parents' checkbooks. The balance of power in the room had shifted. Dr. Johnson could feel it. The board members exchanged uncertain glances as Mrs. Whitley took a seat directly behind Dr. Johnson, a clear statement of where she stood. We will need to deliberate, Chairman Phillips finally said. I understand. Dr. Johnson nodded. Just know that whatever you decide will set a precedent for what Westfield truly stands for. She gathered her materials and walked out, head high, followed by a line of teachers and Mrs. Whitley. In the hallway outside, Mrs. Patel squeezed her hand. No matter what happens next, you've already won something important today. Dr. Johnson nodded, feeling both exhausted and strangely light, as if a weight she'd carried for years had finally been set down. The real fight was just beginning, but for the first time, she wasn't fighting alone. #rich students publicly shame a black teacher, shocked when she expels them. Part 1. The prestigious academy. At Westfield Academy, one of the most elite private schools in the city, Ms. Danielle Thompson began her first semester as the new advanced literature teacher. Despite her impressive credentials, a PhD from Columbia, and published works in prestigious literary journals, some students from wealthy families whispered behind her back. As one of the few black faculty members at the predominantly white institution, Danielle was determined to prove herself through her passion for literature and dedication to her students. Part 2. The Privileged Circle. A group of 5 senior students, led by Blake Richardson and Madison Wells, came from the wealthiest families that had donated generously to the school for generations. Their privilege had always shielded them from consequences, and they felt entitled to special treatment. When Ms. Thompson refused to extend deadlines for their poorly executed assignments and held them to the same standards as other students, they began to resent her strict but fair approach. Part 3. The Social Media Campaign. What began as private complaints escalated when Blake created a private social media group dedicated to mocking Ms. Thompson. The students posted edited photos of her, mimicked her speaking style, and made racist remarks about her appearance and qualifications. They recorded her during classes without permission and posted out-of-context clips to make her look incompetent. The group grew as more students joined, emboldened by anonymity and peer pressure. Part 4. The public humiliation. The situation reached a breaking point during the school's annual fundraising gala. The students had edited together a comedy video that featured racist caricatures and mimicry of Ms. Thompson, planning to accidentally project it during the event. When the video played briefly before being shut down, Ms. Thompson stood frozen as parents, administrators, and students witnessed the public humiliation. Though the video was quickly cut, the damage was done. Part 5. The investigation. Principal Roberts, initially hesitant to upset the school's wealthy donors, was forced to launch an investigation when other faculty members threatened to go public with the story. Its specialists traced the video to its creators, and a thorough search of school devices and the social media group revealed the extent of the harassment campaign. What shocked the administration most wasn't just the content, but how long it had been happening and how many students had participated or remained silent. Part 6. The Reckoning. Armed with irrefutable evidence and supported by the school board's zero-tolerance policy on discrimination, Ms. Thompson exercised her authority to recommend expulsion for the 5 ringleaders. The students and their parents were stunned. They had expected, at most, a temporary suspension. When the parents threatened to withdraw donations and take legal action, Ms. Thompson calmly presented the documented evidence of months of harassment, which constituted grounds for expulsion under both school policy and state anti-discrimination laws. Part 7. The Aftermath and Redemption. The school board sat around the large oak table, tension filling the air as they reviewed the evidence one final time. After 3 hours of deliberation, they voted unanimously to uphold Ms. Thompson's recommendation. All 5 students would be expelled. The next morning, the halls buzzed with whispers. Many students couldn't believe it had actually happened. The Richardson family had donated the school's science wing. The Wells family had 3 generations of alumni. Yet their children were gone, their lockers already emptied. Principal Roberts called an emergency assembly. He stood at the podium, his voice firm but tired. "What happened this week goes against everything Westfield Academy stands for," he said. "We failed as a community by allowing this behavior to continue unchecked. Today marks a new chapter." Ms. Thompson sat in the back row, straight-backed but exhausted. She'd barely slept in days. Part of her had expected to be quietly pushed out, despite being the victim. That's how these things often went. But something had shifted. Over the next few weeks, the school began to change. The board approved a new anti-harassment policy with real teeth. Teachers underwent training about recognizing and addressing discrimination. Student leaders organized listening sessions where kids could talk honestly about school culture. Not everyone was happy. 3 families withdrew their children in protest. 2 major donors publicly announced they would redirect their annual gifts to other institutions. An anonymous parent wrote a scathing letter to the local paper claiming cancel culture had infected Westfield. But something unexpected happened too. Applications for the following year actually increased. It turned out many parents wanted their children in a school that stood up for its values even when it was difficult. Ms. Thompson kept teaching. Her first day back had been the hardest, walking into that classroom, feeling every eye on her, wondering what they were thinking. But she did what she always did. She taught literature with passion and held her students to high standards. Slowly, things began to shift. A quiet girl named Lai brought Ms. Thompson a handwritten note apologizing for not speaking up sooner. The debate team captain asked if she would consider being their faculty advisor. The student newspaper published a thoughtful piece about creating a more inclusive campus. 6 months after the incident, Ms. Thompson received an unexpected email. It was from Tyler, one of the expelled students, now attending a public school across town. "I've been trying to write this for months," it began. "At first I was just angry at you. But my new school has made me think about things differently. I've never been the only white kid in a classroom before. I've never had to work to fit in. It's opened my eyes to what I did to you. I'm not asking for forgiveness or to come back. I just wanted you to know I'm learning." Ms. Thompson read it 3 times before responding with a simple message: "Thank you for this. Learning is all any teacher ever wants for their students." By the following year, Westfield had the most diverse faculty in its 80-year history. The incident became part of orientation discussions about community values. Ms. Thompson was appointed department chair. On the anniversary of the gala, she found a small package in her faculty mailbox. Inside was a first-edition copy of Toni Morrison's Beloved with a note that read, "To the teacher who taught us all our most important lesson." Ms. Thompson ran her fingers over the book's cover, smiling slightly. The path to change was never easy, but sometimes, just sometimes, it led exactly where it needed to go.